I did my student teaching at both Moore Central Junior High School with Christine Mueller and Moore High School with Clint Brown and Diana Williams. We started the year off doing marching band. Our show was called Icy Red, which was kind of an interesting theme. It was really, really dark, which was kind of hard for some of the kids to grasp until about 2 weeks before contest, where they finally start to get the idea and the theme of the show, and then we're really able to convey that. So one of the highlights that I learned from marching band season is to really make sure that your marching band has a great concept of what their show is and is able to portray that, especially if they're planning on competing at OSSA or OBA contests like that. Another big lesson I learned is to make sure that you arrive to contest early. We had an incident where one of our directors didn't think that we needed to arrive early to our warm-up time, and we ended up arriving 15 minutes after our warm-up time for OSSAA contest. And so the kids had to get in uniform, get all of the pit equipment unloaded, and we had these giant 6-foot tarp props that they had to assemble all within 30 minutes, and then get it onto the field, and then run the show. So that was a little crazy. So lesson learned: make sure you get everywhere early, no matter what you think, how much time you think you need to have, because as kids, having some time to breathe after that long bus ride and get focused is extremely important and extremely beneficial for those marching contests. Our second contest that we went to was our big OBA contest in Broken Arrow, competing with all those big schools. Something that I learned that I saw that we did that I didn't really like and would do differently is that we only were going to stay for finals if we made the final round, which I didn't really agree with, because even if we didn't make finals, it would be a great idea for those kids who are mainly underclassmen. Most of our marching band was sophomores, freshmen, and juniors, and it would have been a really good idea for them to be able to see bands like Broken Arrow and Edmund Memorial, and bands that are consistently in the top 12 for that contest, and bands that go to Bands of America competitions, and see the performance level that they have to be at next year for their competition, so that they could succeed. Because whenever they did lose, there were so many tears, there was so much disappointment with themselves, even though that they came in 13th, which is really one place away, and there were just a few points away from making finals. Regardless of how proud we were, they were proud of themselves too, which is always a good thing to instill in your ensemble. After that, we then went to a concert band season that we started. Our concert for the junior high school is on Thursday, and then our concert for the high school is Tuesday. I learned a lot of really valuable lessons about what to do with auditions for these things. For example, when you're auditioning for your bands, you have to make the decision of whether or not you want to have 3 bands, in our case, that were performance-based. And by performance-based, I mean ability-based. So do you equally distribute your higher-playing students throughout the entire ensembles so that you can make ones in all 3 ensembles? Or is your goal to take those students at the level that they're at and put them in an ensemble with similar students so that they can reach... so that they can all work on the same concept, so that next year that maybe they might be able to make the higher bands or the wind ensemble. And that was something that they do at Moore High School. Is what happens is that for the freshmen, when they audition, everyone auditions, and when the freshmen audition, and it was all blind audition, when the freshmen audition, if they make the wind ensemble, they get to stay in the wind ensemble. But if they do not make the wind ensemble, then they get to stay in symphonic band for the remainder of the fall semester, and then in the spring they take all the freshmen, even those that would have beat out people in the symphonic band, and they put them in a freshman band. I don't agree with that, strictly because you have players that are going to be playing music that is beneath them ability-wise and lyrical-wise, and then they get bored, and then they get disinterested in your program and demoralized by the end of the year, unless you instill that consistently from day one, over and over and over again, about the freshman band. I would have liked to have done it where you audition and you make it based on where you make it, rather than you're a freshman, so you have to go into a freshman level band. Because not all freshmen are equal, right? Not all freshmen play the same when they enter high school. Some are way better players than others, and that just depends on how hard they worked at the junior high. Another thing that I learned is lesson planning. We are used to the same template from our college, from our collegiate classes that Dr. Haley has handed out, Dr. Henderson has handed out, and showed us kind of like a template of a lesson plan. Something that I really took away from my experience is how to lesson plan effectively and tie in your core standards, because as much as we all hate live text at the university level and we think it's cumbersome at the educational and professional level, you still have to do what their live text would be essentially, which is called TLE, which is where you get observed and it's reported to the state, and that's how they measure your progress as a teacher. And some of the same documents are required, and one of those documents is you have to have your lesson plans for each day of your classes. And one thing that I like that I didn't know about was that it's really beneficial if you'll put the core standards from the Oklahoma Music Educator website and the numbers that they correlate to on top of your lesson plan. And then I also, on the lesson plan, on the materials needed, there's a modeling instrument, which I never even thought about, is to include that in materials for your lessons. And so now I've got it to where when I'm teaching classes, I've got a clarinet out for the clarinet students because we just start clarinet and flute for their beginning bands. I've got a clarinet out for clarinet students, a flute out for the flute students, and then for the brass class, I'm not a brass player, so it's easier for me to do euphonium, which is something I feel more comfortable with, and it's in a mid range, so we can play in the trombone register if we need to, and if tubas are struggling, it's something close to the tubas where they can hear, mimic, and they can see the valves moving, so that they can also achieve desired results. So that modeling instrument thing is a huge one for me. And something that I had to get really comfortable on is playing on brass instruments in front of brass class, even if it is just a beginning brass class. Another thing I learned is instilling, how to instill this feeling of community within beginning band members, because they come in not knowing what to expect, and being able to instill this idea of an open and creative and safe space for them. We've had some problems this semester with students being bullied because they're in band, and similar situations that occur at a Title I school, students being absent all the time for being suspended or things like that, and how to cope with those things has been really helpful, especially when they might be your lead players in some sections. For example, this concert that we have coming up on Thursday, we're missing two of our lead players who play first part and have the melody and are strong players because they're not able to make it. And so those things are really, really valuable lessons to learn. Is how do you cope with that? How do you adjust? Do you tell the kids that these kids aren't going to be at the concert? Do you not, and make them step up to the plate? Or how do you go about that? And I'm a fan of the second one, where you don't tell them where they're at, and you don't tell them they're not going to make it, because they know it's gossip, it's middle school, and they'll figure it out, but they don't need to know, so that they'll step up to the plate and they'll make sure that their part's solid and learned and they've got their part. With the 7th graders, I like to always instill a sense that it is okay to make mistakes in music, and it's okay to squeak on your clarinet when you're starting, and it's okay to go for the note and then miss it miserably. But you learn, like, what did I do wrong that time, and what can I do better next time? And I think that environment has helped the students to feel included, like they're in control of their education, and that they are in a safe space that, hey, I might miss a note every now and then, but I'm still trying my best. And I've noticed that, especially with my students who struggle. For example, with beginning clarinet, I've got 2 students in there who just struggle because they don't practice and they don't listen, and they've got other issues going on, especially at the home. A lot of parents don't like their kids to practice at home because the sounds in beginning band aren't great. And so one thing I learned, and I am a firm believer in this, is allowing the kids to come in during their lunchtime to practice. Not only does it cuts down on the fact that they are bullied by other students, but B, I liked it because these kids are coming in, they can get individual help if they want to, they're getting ahead, and the same students that I've noticed who come in for these classes, these students are the ones that are sitting at the top of their section. These are the students that are helping other students, and that's what happens a lot of times at the lunch, is that peer teaching goes on. The flute players will help the brass players with things like phrasing, or brass players will help the flute players with things like breathing or air support. And they kind of teach each other at lunch, which helps to foster that sense of community and creativity and that openness in the classroom, which I think is really, really important, especially in a creative art such as music. Those are some of the bigger lessons I've learned. A lot of administrative stuff behind the scenes, and stuff that you have to do there. I've also learned that you have to make sure you have to take it one day at a time. You have to be prepared with a backup, and you have to have a backup for your backup, because something's going to go wrong. pretty much every class period. I remember one class period where I had students coming in to practice during their lunchtime, which is during our 8th grade band time. They have their own practice rooms, and one kid was missing a flute while I'm trying to rehearse Sleigh Ride with the 8th grade band, and on top of that, the bass clarinet, literally the keys just fell off the instrument in the middle of the piece, and it's how do you deal with all of those situations at one time, and those experiences are so invaluable and so appropriate. It's also important, one thing I learned is how to talk to your colleagues, especially when you're working. Things like, I'm the best band teacher around, so we're going to do it my way, do not work well with your colleagues. They don't make them feel good. It's important to be a cohesive team, especially when you're doing team teaching between the high school and the junior high school, is making sure that all of the teachers are on the same page, everyone feels respected, everyone's opinions are valued, and they're presented and discussed in an open way, and that we're not doing this like, we're doing it my way because I said so kind of thing. And I think that that's very important in making sure that your faculty who are coming to help you at the high school, especially during marching band season, where it takes up so much of their outside time, feel valued and respected in their opinions and their work. And then allowing them to speak up during your rehearsal time and allowing them to help contribute is vital and important, I think, because, for example, right now the symphonic band is a band of 154 kids in one band. You cannot hear every single wrong note. You cannot hear, but you can't hear every missed key signature or something like that, or time signature or repeat. But when you have that second person that can stand in the back of the ensemble and work silently with your trombone section about phrasing, or your trumpet section about how to sit up straight, making sure cell phones are off and everyone's paying attention and fully engaged, that's really helpful as well. So creating that team atmosphere is really important, especially in team teaching in a public school system like more public schools, where that's vital to the way that they teach. The teachers come over and they take the clarinets out, and then they'll take, Clint Brown will come over and he'll work with the percussion while I work with the low brass, while Christine works with the tubas and euphoniums, while Diana comes and works with trumpets, and having that individualized attention and making sure that everyone is on the same game plan, because it's really important that you communicate what you want, what your expectations are to your fellow teachers, so that they can get your students to where you want them to be all at the same time, so one group isn't advancing faster than the others. Now, it's kind of hard with percussion because it's a little bit easier than pushing down valves with brass instruments and getting pitch and those kind of things, and those certain instruments move a little faster than others, and I found that especially with like percussion and woodwinds, they're going to move faster than your brass class, so trying to pump out those brass class kids and getting them faster is something that I've had to spend a lot of reflection time on during my student teaching. Is how do you get them to, all of a sudden they have to read bass clef when they're used to treble clef all the time, especially with course standards now, they're required to learn treble clef. And how do you make that switch? And then how do you get them to consistently read in that clef? And how do you encourage them to practice? And skills like that I've learned throughout the junior high school, and those skills are invaluable. Overall, my clinical practice study with Moore High School has been absolutely wonderful. They've done a wonderful job of helping me network with other band directors in the area. They've done a great job of allowing me to take initiatives like judging coda auditions, even if it's just a preliminary auditions, and that helps get you out there and network because you're working with someone else from another school. And so I got to meet the band director from Edmond North, and we got to spend 3 or 4 hours together chatting while we're listening to auditions. And so things like that were super invaluable in my in my clinical practice experience. So overall, it was a wonderful experience. A lot of great things came out of that. Field experience is 100% vital when you're going into the teaching profession, just because in the classroom you can simply not mimic the things that go on in a beginning woodwind class or brass class, especially. Those beginning band classes, you really have to get in there and experience it to be able to deal with it, because there's just no modeling. Even with, we have our intermediate classes where we all play on secondary instruments, and even that, it still sounds way better than anything you're going to get out of those junior high kids. And so the fact that you're able to get in there and work with them on a consistent basis is really helpful in learning those, those little tips and tricks, like flatten your face out to get higher notes for trombones, or pushing air, or things like that. What to look for when clarinets are squeaking, because it's not always just too much mouthpiece. Sometimes you might have a squeaker key, or sometimes a pad is loose, or something like that. Those tips and tricks have become really, really helpful, and helping me feel more confident in a classroom by myself teaching students. So overall, great experience at Moore Public Schools, and I took a lot away, and I'm very grateful for every opportunity I was given there.